I wrote a paper when I was 18 years old saying that the wine industry is what I wanted to be in. So I stopped off for a cup of coffee in the currency trade while on my way to the wine business.
This podcast is sponsored by Arona Wine Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. Visit barkersmarkwines.com.
I'm in Barrington, Illinois, joining a vintner with an incredible background in the business. Welcome, Gillett Johnson, to the podcast. And Gillett is co-proprietor of Barker's Marque Winery, Waverley Vineyard, Marlborough, New Zealand. So interesting name. And so how are you today?
I'm doing really great. It's wonderful to have you here and in our offices. And thank you very much for coming down to see us.
My pleasure.
It's a real honor.
Yeah, beautiful area of Illinois for those people who don't know. Barrington's just a wonderful area. And we have the perfect day after all kinds of weeks of crazy, crazy weather.
It is gorgeous out. It has been hot, and I'm sorry right now for the folks on the East Coast where it still is hot. Not when you see this.
Well, we're going to talk about wine, oddly enough, today, which is somewhat of a big surprise. First thing I want to get into is you and your background. Normally I don't jump into that right away, but I will in your case because I'm very, very curious, extensive and lengthy. But let's go back to before being a professional. Was there a period where wine simply came to you and said, I need you to be with me?
So I grew up in the Finger Lakes, and at the time, Finger Lakes was a budding wine industry. After having been a very major wine industry, it was the largest wine industry in the United States before California and Washington and Oregon came on the scene. So I grew up in a little town on Seneca Lake. When did I realize wine? Well, so when we were young and we had a fort, maybe 15, 16 years old, the guys would swipe a beer or two from their parents' refrigerator and go meet down at the fort. I showed up with a bottle of Riesling. Was made fun of a little bit, but I think that had a lot to do with the start in the wine industry.
Was there an understanding of Riesling, or was there an understanding of wine in general, or was it just simply, well, this is alcohol?
There was an understanding that there was an industry around us. Glenora was owned by French people. It was really interesting to be on the same lake that I was. And when you went down to Watkins Glen, if you're going to the track, which I did frequently, you passed by dozens and dozens of vineyards. It was part of the makeup of what the Finger Lakes is all about. And now much more so than it ever has been before. It's really grown amazingly. So a big part of how I began to love wine. I think I spent a little bit of time tending grapes for a few weeks and then tying vines. And then I bartended. And that also introduced me to I think so many of us, whether it's in restaurants, and especially fine dining restaurants, learn our first course in what it means to open up a bottle of wine and pour a bottle of wine and watch people appreciate that. So that was really helpful. So I went to, I did my university studies at the American University in Paris. I was very fortunate to be able to go to school there. And of course, that was the next big eye-opening segment of my life where, when you live in France, again, I don't want to make it overly complex, but when you show up at parties, we were bringing bottles of wine, and bottles of wine at that time were $2, $3, $4. For $1, you could buy a bottle of wine in a plastic jug, and it tasted good to us. So, but there were a lot of influences when you lived there, and the places I could travel and the vineyards that I could see. It was pretty amazing. I didn't quite know that's what I wanted to do, but I was pretty close. Wine and food. La Varenne Cooking School was right down the street from where I lived. Going out was drinking wine a lot of the time.
Yeah. How long did you live there?
About 2.5 years, almost 3. I came back to the United States and immediately, after bouncing in and out of my parents' house for a couple of weeks, went down to New York City and worked on Wall Street for a number of years. Which, by the way, Wall Street, while it seems like Wall Street's very much all about the numbers in the currency game, a lot of it was about entertainment. And entertainment took wine to the next level. So when we were eating at these incredible establishments, we began to order the Burgundies and the Bordeauxs and got to really understand the guys of the world out of Italy and just amazing wine. So that had a huge effect.
Well, how did that transition happen?
I wrote a paper when I was 18 years old saying that the wine industry is what I wanted to be in. So I stopped off for a cup of coffee in the currency trade while on my way to the wine business.
And your first gig in the wine business?
So after a number of years in New York, I moved to California. And my first job was pretty incredible. I got a chance to work with an import company, and we imported wines from Burgundy, wines from Loire Valley, which were amazing. We represented some of the great wineries out of Napa Valley, if I may, including Robert Keenan, Caneros Creek, legends. The ones who started their vineyards in 1974. They were pretty incredible, and all of them had a huge impact on what I did. I was very lucky to have that as my first job.
You have this opportunity to taste the world.
I did, and it allowed me to get back to France on a fairly regular basis, and almost because I spoke French, to guide the tours in many ways. So it gave me some cred that I probably hadn't quite earned in the wine business at that point.
Were you swayed in any one particular direction, or were you being as open-minded as possible? I'm sure you were to a degree, but did you lean any particular direction?
In all honesty, even at that age, 26, 27, 28, 29, they were underappreciated. I would appreciate them a lot more now. But, you know, celebrating my 26th birthday at Chateau Gruyere had a pretty major impact. And getting to know the microscopic aspects of the wine industry was amazing to me. I loved that part. And having wines from around the world were great. My focus tended to be more of the California, Napa Valley wines at the time. And, I thought it was important not just to learn about what was in my portfolio, but what the defined competitive set looked like and what they were doing. And, to really respect the people who were buying wine from me, that I respected what they were buying as well, even if it had nothing to do with our wines. I think that's very important and maybe a bit of a lost art these days.
I'm going to kind of pick on one winemaker, and that, of course, is Peter Mondavi, Charles Krug, because we were talking about him before the interview. You spent time there. What were you doing there?
So I was my title is Vice President of Sales, and it was a wonderful time, a wonderful venture for me. I was coming off of doing what I just talked about, and actually I'd worked for another company called Cannon Wines, where Raymond was one of our large wineries, and so moving up valley a little bit was very natural, and we were going through an incredible period at Charles Krug. I think the Robert Mondavi Winery had just gone public. We became the only family-owned winery in Napa Valley, and there was a lot of pride to be taken there. And there was a lot of we went through some really incredible growth, I think, for that winery during this time. And they also just divested, I think, 600,000 cases. I may be wrong on the number. It's been a few years of Sauvignon Blanc. But they are a winery of incredible means and incredible vineyards, maybe 400 plus acres in the valley. So I had a lot to work with, and Jack Cole was a winemaker then, personal hero of mine.
The whole point of the interview today is New Zealand, Marlborough specifically, and the wines you're making today. A bit of a leap, an extraordinary wine area, but it ain't Napa Valley in terms of locale, temperature, and all that sort of stuff. So tell me what led to your partnership and how this all happened.
So a couple things. I was running North America for a publicly traded winery in Margaret River, which is in Western Australia, which put me down in that part of the world quite a bit. When we were finished with that, I started consulting for a winery down in New Zealand, and that brought me to New Zealand quite frequently. And I met Simon's brother. They were just getting a vineyard underway, and he introduced me to Simon, and they needed that whole sales aspect of the winery, and we put together a new company. It was Barker's Mark Vineyard. We put together Barker's Mark Wine and Waverly Vineyard because I think in a name you should tell who you are and what you are and where you are. So we were able to start by doing that. And it made sense to me. I was not a huge fan of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. It wasn't a passion play that I ran after Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, this was a long time ago. Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc was barely even, hitting AC Nielsen at that point. But Simon was doing some incredible things with wine.
And I want to jump in, if I could, real quick, because I did not introduce your partner, Simon Barker. and he's winemaker as well as partner and COO. And I'll let you go from there. Just want to make sure we have that identification so people know who Simon is.
There's nothing I could be doing in this wine industry if it wasn't for Simon. He makes spectacular wines. He makes the kind of wines that I love to sell and he loves to make. So it's very harmonious that way. Just a little bit more about the genesis. This was not just a winery that was bought or a vineyard that was bought. This was a piece of property in Blind River right on the ocean that was an old sheep station. It was not a winery. We bought and planted it ourselves. There's nothing intrinsic or extrinsic about this vineyard that we don't understand after building it ourselves. And we had a lot to learn. And the vineyard talked to us and we listened. I can tell you the vineyards laughed at us. We thought we were going to make one wine coming out of this one slightly less than 100-acre vineyard. And every time we did a blend and we looked at it, the vineyard kept saying, good blend, but I got to tell you, Block A is tasting pretty good. Block C is tasting pretty dramatic. To the point where we were pressed to really, if we were going to make the wine that Simon and I promised we would make, and that's the best possible wine we could, there were 4 wines in that vineyard. We thought the culmination of all these different soil types would make this one really incredible, complex wine. It was the individual blocks that made the more complex wine.
How many acres are we talking about?
Just shy of 100.
And it does go back to the question of Sauvignon Blanc, which is a wine I love, and also a Riesling, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
But it's you're putting your money into something that maybe isn't the hit record everybody seems to think of in the wine industry.
It's easy to say today that you went to Berkeley and feel like a show-off, but 40 years ago you went to Berkeley and it cost you $30 credit, so it was no big deal. Kind of like Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc wasn't that big of a thing when we started. It was really the love of Simon being there, having worked around the world, including in Sancerre, ending up in Marlborough, working at other wineries, met his to-be wife, fell in love, bought a vineyard. It's a Taylor Swift love story.
I was going to say, great love story.
Yeah.
Now, that's the northern part, if I'm not mistaken, of New Zealand. Is that right?
It's the northern end of the South Island.
Of the South Island. Yeah.
That's correct. You were right.
Now, logistically, I'm assuming Simon lives there full-time?
Simon actually lives right on the vineyard, so, oftentimes we're told, these vines are touched by human hands 7 times a year. Yeah. Ours are touched by human hands every night when he walks the dog.
Really sucks that he has to live in a vineyard, but I feel really bad for him.
Pretty beautiful.
Pass that along to him if you would.
I will.
How often do you get there?
A couple times a year. I don't, he takes great care of things. He and I talk on the phone every week. We cover a lot of topics when we talk. Sometimes we just talk about things that you wouldn't think that have nothing to do with the wine, but come up with something that like, did you remember this or did you remember that? Sure. And so I don't have to always be there.
I'm hoping somewhere along the line we can get Simon on a microphone or a telephone or whatever it might be.
It would be
but a little bit of his background, if you will, please.
Absolutely. Man, he's made wine in England, Greece, Sancerre, which I think, being classically trained in Sancerre before you move to Marlborough and start to make wine is a pretty important thing. I know that he's been in California. I believe he's been in Oregon making wine. He really just has a wanderlust of what to do, but I have no doubt that not only was his romantic love found in New Zealand, but his winemaking passion and love. I hear it from him all the time. But a great family man, and I couldn't imagine a better business partner after all these years. Nice
to hear that. You brought up the point about the terroir, the land, Blind River, Marlborough. Tell me about that.
Sure. Well, Marlborough, we're still working on trying to teach people that it's not New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. You wouldn't want, somebody to say, oh, Scarecrow, or, 100 Acre. That's a great American wine. We say it's a Napa wine, so we try to say it's a New Zealand wine. But if you look in, if you telescope in, there's so much to see. And, Marlborough has a multitude of different soil types, multitude of different, terroirs built into it, microclimates built into it. And, in fact, Wairau, which is part of Marlborough, is the largest growing region in New Zealand. And then Arwatiri Valley is the second. Arwatiri Valley is interesting because it's fairly good size. It starts from the beach and it goes, I think, 25 5 miles inland. And and it goes up to 1,000 feet. Blind River, where we're located, which is almost a sub-region of Arwitary, is much smaller. It's 5 miles inland from the beach and is only, it goes up to 300 feet. Ours is all basically, we're 3 meters above sea level. And, we're located in between the ocean and in between this beautiful mountain range. Our diurnal temperatures are incredible. And it's that warm days, cool nights, beautiful wind, whether it's coming down out of the mountains, I'm not sure it's quite a mistral, but it's a beautiful wind, or we're getting something off of the ocean that really creates that long hang time. We have early bud break and we have a late harvest, and it gives it that long hang time, which I think is so important. If you want to know more about wine, you have a world of opportunity, millions of ways to understand wine, and use grok for something besides a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And I got to tell you, you can find out about wineries, winemaking techniques, regions, states, countries, the planet. And I think once you use this, you're going to know a lot more about the wine that you drink than you do about the food that your Uber Eats guy delivers to you.
Well, do you think that maybe sometimes we take wine too seriously?
I think we're told that, but I got to tell you, we are very serious about how we make wine.
Sure, of course.
The complexity, the region that we come from, what we're portraying. And we have to be serious because we're, competing against a visual of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc that tends to be a little bit commoditized because of its popularity these days. And it's not by a whole group of us that exist. We're making very serious wines. So, Simon and I are, as I use the term, we're very irreverent when it comes to the industry about how we think about it and how we don't want others to tell us, oh, you need to be more simple about wine. I think, as I've explained, you can drink wine in a lot of different ways. You can have fun with wine. I think we've made it pretty accessible. And there'll be people that push back, but that's their job. They always want to push back on what we're doing and what we could be doing different. But I think we're on the right march. I think we're on the right voyage.
And then, of course, most importantly for our listeners who'd like to learn about you online, what is your website?
You can reach us through 2 websites. One is www.internationalvines.wine, and the other is www.barkersmarkwines.com.
Excellent. The best part is you're close by and you're making wines on the other side of the world practically, which is totally amazing to me. I thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it, Gillett.
Thank you for coming down, Ray, and it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Your questions have been great, and it's been a lot of fun.